Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got a wonderful seminar for you today with a very distinguished speaker and, of course, talking about an extremely distinguished subject. So for many of us in Hong Kong, CHEN Yang holds a particularly important place, I think, in our hearts, as well as in his position for the development of law in Hong Kong as well. We're very pleased to have members of CHEN's family with us today, and of course, Mr. Anthony Neo, who gave such a moving tribute to CHEN at the memorial service as well. And it's great to see colleagues, students, former students, and many members of Hong Kong's legal community with us here today to talk and to hear about such a distinguished member of our community. Before I hand over to our speaker today, please remember that you can text in questions to us using the chat function, and we will try and leave a few minutes at the end for some questions on what I'm sure will be a very interesting seminar. So our speaker today is Professor Chen Li, who is a professor at Fudan University Law School, and he also has an appointment at the School of Management. He's also a visiting professor at Washington University School of Law, and he's been educated in law in various jurisdictions in Hong Kong, in Singapore, the United States, and in England as well. His research interests include international law, the history of legal education, and even law and technology. His recent articles have appeared in peer-reviewed journals, including the Asian Journal of World Trade Organization and International Health Law and Policy, Hong Kong Law Journal, the Human Rights Quarterly, the International Journal, and the Journal of International Dispute Settlement, the Journal of Legal History Review, and the Leiden Journal of International Law. He has also written a number of articles about CHEN Yang, and based upon those, I think he's going to explain to us a little bit about the importance of CHEN in Hong Kong's development of law. So I'll hand over now to Professor Chen Li. Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your kind introduction. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to give a short seminar about a distinguished judge and jurist. Actually, he was born in Hong Kong. He was born in Shanghai, and he became the first Chief Justice, ethnic Chinese Chief Justice in Hong Kong. So what I plan to do for this seminar, essentially, I aim to explore Yang's lesser-known law school year in Shanghai and London. I will try to help you to unravel what formative experience shaped his journey as first China-born judge in colonial Hong Kong. Then I essentially will try to shed light on factors which influence his decision and passions. And moreover, I would try to provide you with some historical context in order to understand how he managed to achieve this remarkable appointment in colonial Hong Kong. So for my seminar, it consists of 5 parts. So first, I will try to introduce CHEN to you. Then I will try to make use of archived documents I gathered in Shanghai and England to help you understand how he pursued a very distinctive legal education in Shanghai and London. Then I will try to shed light on his attempt to obtain employment at the colonial government legal service. At the very beginning, he was not successful. So I have found some archived documents which is able to shed light on this episode of his life. Then I will explain how he managed to become the first ethnic Chinese Chief Justice of Hong Kong. And in the end, I will try to, as I said, illuminate factors which contribute to his ascent to Hong Kong's foremost judicial post. So Sir Tia was born in Shanghai, and he passed away in Hong Kong. He came from a Cantonese family with long history as comprador for the British firm, very well established John Swire Sons. So his family, a Cantonese family, I think the family had been in Shanghai for 3 generations, very well known, very well established, and they got fantastic connection with the British commercial establishment in Shanghai. And I think his experience is quite unique because he spent his formative 20 years in Shanghai. He was born in Shanghai, was brought up in Shanghai. He went to St. John's Middle School in Shanghai, followed by his legal education at Suzhou University Law School, also known as Comparative Law School of China. Then in 1949, he did not finish his undergraduate degree in Shanghai. He left for Hong Kong. Then he moved to London in order to finish his legal education. So, as you can tell, his family was quite well known in Shanghai. And on the left, this is the portrait of his uncle, and another picture, a group picture, which was taken in Hong Kong and obtained from one of his relatives. Apparently, the family was quite well connected with Hotong family as well. So this letter of introduction, which was written in 1954 when he was in London, it could throw light on the fact his family, as a matter of fact, because of family connection, he was able to navigate, for example, the admission to Gray's Inn, admission to University College London when he arrived there. He got someone whose name is John Swire Scott, a member of this very prominent family who became his guardian in Hong Kong. So Sir Tiao, he grew up during a very tumultuous period in Chinese history. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931 when he was 2 years old. And the war of resistance against Japanese invasion intensified in 1937. Shanghai fell under Japanese occupation in 1941 when he was still in middle school. After the defeat of Japanese forces, China was embroiled in a bloody civil war. So he grew up against this very complex historical background. So the university he attended in Shanghai, it's a university established by American missionary. So the university actually was based in Suzhou, which is very close to Shanghai. It's named the Suzhou University. But in 1915, American missionary who was also a lawyer, he thought Suzhou probably would not be an ideal location to establish a law department for the university. That's why he proposed to the university administrators to use the mission, the Christian mission's premise in Shanghai. They operate a middle school. He proposed using the middle school premise to establish a law school in Shanghai, because at that time, as you could appreciate, it was difficult to recruit law teachers. What he got in mind, he got a very small budget. So he tried to recruit practicing lawyers in Shanghai. At that time, because of unequal treating, you got various courts in Shanghai. Courts not run by Chinese government, courts run by, for example, American government. You could United States courts for China in Shanghai. Then you got British courts in Shanghai as well. So at that time, this very visionary legal educator, he came up with the idea to establish a law school in Shanghai. It was established in 1915. As you can tell, they recruit quite westernized students to study law in Shanghai. And this law school during the Tiao's time, as you can see from the picture, which was taken in 1940s, they already run moot court practice for their students. So he developed strong interest in legal study during secondary school. He stated this in his personal statement when he applied to University College London. He stated that he developed a strong interest in legal study during secondary school, finding the fulfilling and practical. When he completed his secondary education in Shanghai at the prestigious St. John's Middle School. St. John's Middle School essentially is a middle school affiliated with the prestigious St. John's University in Shanghai. So he decided to enroll in the undergrad law program at Suzhou University Law School, also known as Comparative Law School of China. And before Yang's enrollment, the law school boasted a number of very eminent graduates. At that time, some of their graduates had already wielded a lot of influence in courts, diplomatic service of China, the educational sector, as well as administrative service. When Sir T.L. decided to enroll in law school at that time, quite a number of CLSC alumni, they were working for the military tribunal in Tokyo. So they essentially took part in Tokyo trial. So the experience he obtained in Shanghai, I was quite curious at the very beginning when I began my research. I tried to find out how he managed to become the first ethnic Chinese Chief Justice in Hong Kong, how he managed to deal with his common law cases when he actually spent his first 20 years in Shanghai. He began his legal education in mainland China. So I zeroed on the very impressive lineup of faculties in Shanghai. Then I came to understand, as a matter of fact, at that time, for his class and for law students at the Comparative Law School of China, they had the opportunity to study Chinese law, continental European law, Anglo-American law at one go. And the faculty there consists of legal scholars, lawyers, and judges. In one of letter he wrote the letter in 1950s. He stated CLSC, essentially it was the best law school in South China, because at that time there was another law school in Beijing. It's called Chaoyang Law School. So, and it was at that time it was the only law school who offered Anglo-American law curriculum teaching. To get an offer from the law school, it was not so easy. Fortunately, his family boasted very good connections with a couple of CLSC alumni. For example, in my research at the Shanghai Archive, I found out Cecilia Zhang, who was a very prominent practicing lawyer in Shanghai, a part-time professor at the law school, he actually facilitated his admission to the law school. And Cecilia was one of path-breaking Chinese women lawyer. Later on, you will see he was a quite distinguished legal scholar as well. And Sir Tia was quite fortunate. He managed to gain a place from the law school, and he joined a new track, which was only recently introduced. It was introduced in 1946 to teach law students to prepare for career in judiciary. After the war, as you can tell, all these institutions, they had been greatly shattered or affected during decades of the Japanese invasion, as well as the ongoing civil war. So the nationalist government was quite anxious to create special programs to train law graduates to become judicial officers. At that time, you have the option to enroll in this very special program, or you could enroll in the standard LB program. But according to his application filed with the law school, he decided to enroll in this very special track. The advantage of enrolling in this track is when you finish your legal education, you will be able to get a judicial appointment without additional exam. Essentially, you don't have to take judicial service examination. I would argue when he decided to enroll this program, it already revealed his early interest in a career in the judiciary. So this is the lady who facilitated his admission to the law school. And she was an alumni of the law school, and eventually went to US to earn additional degree, undergraduate degree, as well as master's degree from Columbia University. And ultimately, she earned a JSD, a doctorate in law from NYU in 1942. And he was one of China's very few women representatives at the UN. Essentially at the UN at that time, they got an agenda on the status of women. So the Chinese government appointed him to be the Chinese representative in various meetings. So the legal education he obtained in Shanghai, I think it would have profound impact on his future career, particularly after the decision to essentially for the Beijing, for the central government to resume its sovereignty over Hong Kong, and for Hong Kong to develop its own jurisprudence. The reason is he actually received very good training in Chinese law in Shanghai for almost 3 years. He acquired a solid foundation in Chinese law, and he took courses like constitutional law, administrative law, and others. And he studied with legal scholars who got many years of either, for example, practicing experience, or some of them, they had to work as judges. And for this curriculum, at that time, these courses were taught in the Chinese language. So in 1940s, for this law school, when they began, the entire curriculum, except like 1 or 2 courses, the entire curriculum was taught in English language. But in 1940s, when he studied Chinese law, China already got textbook written in Chinese language. As a result, he studied Chinese law in Mandarin. So this is the copy of transcript I found in the archive. It could tell he had been fully exposed to almost the full set of Chinese law curriculum. And also you could tell in his early year as a law student, he had demonstrated strong interest in Anglo-American law. And he appeared to excel in the study of these subjects. In a couple of decades, he would come to deal with as a judicial officer in Hong Kong. And the Anglo-American law faculty at Comparative Law School Shanghai, they boast very impressive law professors who had been trained mainly in the US, common law jurisdiction like Canada, and quite a number of professors who taught him. As a matter of fact, they belong essentially to the second generation of Chinese legal scholar who leveraged their scholarship from Tsinghua University, the Boxing Indemnity Scholarship, or various other scholarship to study law in the US and other jurisdictions. So one of his professors in late 1940s, he went back to Yale. He graduated from Yale in 1924 with an LB degree. Then he studied a year in Berlin as well as in France. So his professor tried to obtain both common law and continental legal education, for example, in 1920s. And he went back to Yale, and he offered, I think, the first Chinese law course at the Yale Law School. As you can tell from this photo, there was not a lot of American law students who were interested in Chinese law at that time. And you might recognize this Westerner in the photo. He was the former dean of Harvard Law School, Roscoe Pound. So He visited law school. As a matter of fact, he gave a great deal of help to this law school. And a number of people in this photo taught Sir TL in Shanghai. So when Sir TL was in Shanghai, this gentleman was the dean of the law school. He was a graduate of this law school and went to Northwestern University for graduate studies. After a year studying in the US, he earned a Juris Doctor degree and came back to China, and he began his career at comparative law school as a law professor as well as a part-time lawyer. There's another professor who taught Sir TL, Arthur Yao, and after 1949, he left China. He moved to the US, became one of pioneer China-born law professor at American Law School. So for many years, he taught American contract law at the St. Mary University Law School in the US. So he was also a graduate of this law school, and he went to US at the University of Michigan. He obtained his LLM, SJD, as you can tell from this letter, which I found in his file when he applied to law teaching job in the US. He earned his SJD in 1930s, and he specialized in international law. But he was quite interested in contract law, so he taught Sir TL contract law. And Asa had 1 year experience studying law at King's College London. When he finished his US legal education, he left for London. And this professor taught Sir TL Torts, a graduate of Tsinghua University, who won a very competitive boxer indemnity scholarship to go to the US. He earned a master law degree from University of Toronto Law School, the very first Chinese student who earned an LLM from this Canadian law school. At that time, the law school required him to complete common law training. He got to take 5 introductory undergraduate courses. Essentially, when Professor Ching went to Canada, he received a very intensive common law education. He studied Chinese law at Tsinghua. So he taught Sir TL torts. And Mr. Huang, actually, his son was a very prominent academic administrator in Shanghai. He taught Sir TL a couple of courses as well, a graduate of this law school who earned his SJD from National University Law School in the US. Now, National University Law School has become part of George Washington University. So at height of the Civil War, he left his study in May 1949. He withdrew from the program, as you can tell from his student dossier, which is preserved in Shanghai Archive. He was just a year short of completing his Bachelor of Law degree program. I think at that time, he probably realized it would be wise for him to discontinue his study and move to Hong Kong. Some of his family members moved with him to Hong Kong, but his dad stayed behind. When he arrived in Hong Kong, he was still quite keen to continue his education. But the dilemma he got was, at that time, there was no law school in Hong Kong. The first law school was only established in the law department was only established in 1969 at Hong Kong U. If he tried to continue his legal education, he got to go abroad. Most of his classmates in similar situation, they left with the US. But the challenge he apparently confronted was American law degree would not qualify him for legal practice in Hong Kong. So for his classmates who eventually settled down in Hong Kong, I found letters they wrote. They essentially expressed disappointment. The American degree, American JD, would not open doors for them in Hong Kong. So I think that explains why he decided to continue his study in England. In order to gain admission, he got to take the London University matriculation exam. So he took it in January 1950. He passed all the subjects except logic. And I did find a note he penned at that time to say he did not do well in this exam. It was because he had a fever when he took this particular exam. So he moved to Hong Kong. He moved to London in June 1950. But the challenge he got was how could he obtain a place at a prestigious university like UCL Faculty of Law. Fortunately, his family connection came to help. John Swire Scott, who at that time was the director of this very well-known British firm, he acted as his guardian, and he had known Young's family for like 25 years, according to a letter I found in the archive. So first, what he tried to do, he tried to introduce Yang to A.G. Morkius. So who was this gentleman? This gentleman at that time, he worked for the Chinese University Committee in London. This committee was tasked to promote Sino-UK education, and this committee act as essentially the UK Boxer Indemnities Office in the UK. So he had a great deal of experience in placing Chinese scholar with various university in the UK. So the very first thing he tried to do, he essentially told Sir T.L., you got to take Latin classes because Latin was quite important for your study of law. So he arranged Oxford-educated John William Gardiner, who was a tutor, to tutor him Latin language in preparation for London University matriculation exam. And according to a note his tutor wrote, he was quite pleased with his pupil. He praised his work ethic. He was delighted with his fine demeanor, and the two eventually struck up a friendship. And Sir Tia was quite fortunate at that time. The dean of the law school was someone who had very significant connection with Hong Kong. G.W. Keaton, very well-known legal don in the UK. As a matter of fact, he began his career in Hong Kong, at Hong Kong University. Before the establishment of the law faculty, Hong Kong University used to offer a number of law-related modules. And he was the one who built a couple of law-related courses in Hong Kong in 1920s. So also it came as no surprise why UCL, because at that time, Sir T.L. got to the option either to study at LSE, which is quite popular with Chinese students as well, or King's College London, if he wanted to pursue his legal education in UK. UCL got long-running connection with law students from mainland China and Hong Kong. For Hong Kong, the law school enrolled a couple of very famous people from Hong Kong, for example, F.T. CHEN and Simon Lee. They had all studied at UCL and law degree from there. I think why he decided to study in London, it was because at that time, intercollegiate teaching was available. Essentially, you would have the option to study with some of the very best law done in UK. You could enroll in courses at UCL, King's College London, and LSE. So he applied, and he was interviewed. Apparently, he did it very well. He acquitted himself well, so he gained a place. So this is the picture of F.T. CHEN, born in Hong Kong, a Queen's boy. He was educated at Queen's. Then he left for UCL in 1912, 1911, the late Qing dynasty, and he earned the LLB, and he became the first Chinese to earn a Doctor of Law from any university in the UK. So he received his Doctor of Law from UCL in 1916, and he wrote a doctoral dissertation which was published, and he eventually became China's second judge on the Permanent Court of International Justice. What is quite interesting to me, the first and second, both of them, they came from Hong Kong. The first one was Wang Chonghui, who was born in Hong Kong, whose father was a priest in Hong Kong, and he was educated at Queen's as well, and he became China's first judge on PCIJ. And they met in London. As a matter of fact, Wang and F.T. CHEN, they prepared for the bar exam together. They developed a very strong friendship. I was quite fortunate. I enjoyed doing archive research, so I spent time in London. I found Sir TL's application form and a personal statement. At that time, for you to gain a place from UCL, you have to draft a very short personal statement as well. And during the interviewer will ask you some questions based upon the material you submitted. So this application form made it quite clear. He completed his secondary education in Shanghai, studied law in Shanghai for almost 3 years. And then he decided to come to London to study law. At that time, I think probably this is still true today, at least when I studied in England, that was still true. The English law school, they would not offer you course exemptions. It means even if you have already completed the law degree at a common law jurisdiction, if you try to earn a law degree from English university at that time, you essentially have to do the entire curriculum. That explains why Sir TL, he spent 3 years. He completed the full curriculum. I think this eventually turned out to be advantageous to him because he received a full-fledged English legal education. As you can tell from this slide, I obtained the information from the archive at the UCL. As you could tell, he studied with some leading names in England at that time. And what was interesting to me, because for the first and second year at that time, essentially you got to complete these mandatory courses. In the third year, you would have the option to take electives. I was quite curious to find out what courses interest him as a law student. It turned out he seemed to be quite interested in public international law, and he studied with someone. At that time, actually, he met Bing Chen. Bing Chen was the son of F.T. CHEN. Bing earned his PhD from UCL and became a law don at UCL. So he studied, Sir TL studied public international law with George Swansberg and Leslie Green. Leslie Green was eventually became a dean of, now it's called the National University of Singapore. At that time, it's called University of Malaya in Singapore. An Englishman who eventually moved to Canada. And the Sir TL seemed to be quite interested in conflict of law as well. And he studied with a leading conflict of law professor who was a professor at that time at the UCL, at LSE. And the jurisprudence, law of domestic relations, family law. And I think at that time, it appears he took interest in some gender equality issues because for the law of domestic relations at that time, it was taught by the field professor. If you take a look at syllabus, they appear to show some topics related to gender equality issue. And in 3 year time, he finished his LLB degree with second-class honors, lower division. It was a fine result. Nowadays, you got lots of grade inflation. I've checked quite a lot of people's academic records at UCL. It appears like 2-1, 2-2. As a matter of fact, they were very, very good grades. And it was quite clear he aspired to become a barrister. So what he tried to do, he got 4 choices. There are 4 inns in London. He decided to apply for admission to Gray's Inn. Gray's Inn, as a matter of fact, is the smallest of the inn, and this inn admitted its first Chinese student in 1899. I think a lot of people in the audience, you would know, the first Chinese person who was called to bar in England, it was someone from Hong Kong, the Chinese diplomat Wu Tingfang, who was called to the bar from Lincoln Inn in 1877. And then gradually, you got a couple of people from Hong Kong, for example, Sir CUHK. They made their way to England to study law. And for the Grey Inn, as a matter of fact, you got quite a number of notable early members from Hong Kong. And all these members, as you could tell, they went to secondary school in Hong Kong. Most of them, they had already completed their undergraduate education at very young Hong Kong universities. When Sir Tiao was at the Grey Inn, I think there was no doubt, he met a female fellow law student from Hong Kong, Grace Young. And her family was quite well known in Hong Kong as well. She had already completed her undergraduate study at Hong Kong University, and she was reading law at the Grace Inn. So she did not obtain an undergraduate law degree in London. For Sir Tiao, at that time, there was a problem he got to deal with. The admission policy had already been changed. When people like Wu Tingfang, when they went to England to obtain, for example, legal education, there was no restriction on your nationality. But for solicitor, you got to be British subject. So he got to deal with this problem. Essentially, he got to obtain a dispensation from the nationality rule. So he used family connections. I found letters which revealed his family friends, put him in touch with quite a well-known practicing barrister in London to petition for Sir Tiao's admission to Gray's Inn. And his petition highlighted his need to study English law and his intention to practice in Hong Kong. I think at that time, why the Yingzhou court imposed nationality restriction, probably the fear was you got too many person called to bar, and the job market probably it was not quite favorable. So because of his family connection, and the petition was quite well drafted. In July 1950, the master of bench approved his application. And moreover, probably arranged for support from the Inn, including a big brother mentor for Sir Tiao. So I'm interested in showing you a couple of pioneers from Hong Kong who were trained at Gray's Inn. So they were called to bar from Grey Inn. Mr. Lo Tongfang, who was quite a well-known personality in Hong Kong, and who finished his undergraduate education at Hong Kong U in 1926, was called to bar in Hong Kong, I think in 1931. So these people preceded him. And Grace Yan, who was called to bar from Grade Inn. Eventually, she was called to bar in Hong Kong as well. So when he tried to seek admission, as I already told you, he got to deal with his non-British subject status. He wrote the letters. He obtained letter support from influential and powerful people. Eventually, he overcame the challenge. He got to pass the bar exam. At that time, the bar exam consisted of 2 parts, but he got only to take the final part, because if you have already finished your LB degree, that could be a substitute for the part 1. So the final exam, you essentially got to do papers on criminal procedure, common law, company law, divorce, evidence and civil procedure. And he did quite well, obtained a second-class lower division, and he met all the requirements for the bar. At that time, as a matter of fact, this bar exam performance was quite creditable. So he was called to the bar at the Grade Inn on July 6, 1954. Usually, for those Chinese law students from Hong Kong, you would move back to Hong Kong right away. But he decided to gain some experience by reading in chambers. So after being called to the bar, he sought practical experience through pupillage under practicing barristers, his family friend. So his family friend eventually arranged to take him under his wings. But at that time, for you to do pupillage, you got to pay a fee. And pupillage offer no remuneration. That was post-1949. His family fortune had already suffered a setback. Imagine what had happened to his family business in Shanghai after essentially the communist forces they prevailed in civil war. So his family situation forced him eventually to seek financial aid from the Grade Inn. It was quite a big change for him due to his family's changed circumstance. So he applied for financial aid from Grade Inn's trust fund. And in his application, he expressed his desire to practice as barrister in Hong Kong, seeking a 6-month pupillage. The masters of the bench, they reviewed his application together with supporting documents. They were impressed. They actually offered him the funding for 12 months of pupillage. Of course, Sir Tia was delighted to have the opportunity to spend an additional year in London with some funding from Grade Inn. That explains why he eventually obtained 1 year practical experience through a pupillage. And during this time, he dated and married someone. I would say this marriage, it was instrumental in broadening his professional opportunity in Hong Kong. At least, I would argue, it opened doors for him when he decided to join the legal service or judiciary. He married the daughter of a very prominent legal luminary in Hong Kong, William Tam. William N.T. Tam was a barrister as well as a lawmaker in Hong Kong. So they got married in England, and the couple, they returned to Hong Kong in September 1955, shortly after completing his pupillage. So that's his application for funding. So when he returned to Hong Kong, as a matter of fact, when he was still in London, he aspired to obtain legal appointments. He sought job opportunity with Hong Kong government. So when he applied for legal appointment through Colonial Office, as I've said, It was not successful. Few Chinese served in the colonial government legal service due to racial discrimination. His father-in-law was a pioneering Chinese barrister and a magistrate. His father-in-law managed to overcome the racial barrier. His father-in-law was a Eurasian. And his father-in-law achievement included serving in multiple courts, receiving an OBE in 1951. So Sir Tiao aspired for securing legal appointments. I think at that time he got a couple of role models. Role models like Lo Hing-sing and Patrick Yu, Su Xiu, and all of them, they managed to shatter the racial glass ceiling by securing some form of appointment with the colonial government as legal officers. And moreover, someone who preceded him in London, who came from a very prominent family, Simon Lee, he broke racial barrier as well. He became the first Chinese justice to appeal in 1980s. So in order to obtain appointment with the colonial legal service, he got to obtain letter of support from Gray Ing. So I managed to find these archival documents to shed light on this episode of his career. So it was not successful at the very beginning. Later on, when he was in Hong Kong, then he decided to try to obtain appointment as a magistrate. As you can tell from his biography, he pulled it off in this occasion. And in order to file application, he got to obtain certifications from London. So that's Sir Tiao's father-in-law, who finished his education at Hong Kong U before making his way to UCL. Well, before UCL, as a matter of fact, his father-in-law was at Oxford, and he completed a diploma in political science in 1922. Then he decided to obtain a legal education at UCL as well. So he did part of his legal education as internal students. Eventually, he switched to become an external student. So he earned his LB, as a matter of fact, as an external student. Another pioneer, I think a role model, Patrick Yu. I think most of you might know his story. He passed away in recent years. He was educated at Hong Kong U before obtaining a scholarship to do a PPE at Oxford University at the Merton College. And his father was the first Chinese person, the first Chinese Mertonian, the first Chinese person to earn a place from Merton College at Oxford. So his father was Inspector of Education in Hong Kong. And Lo Hing-sing was a student of Hong Kong U as well. So when he returned to Hong Kong, the very first thing he got to do is to seek admission to local bar. And he practiced in his father-in-law's chamber, but initially he struggled with few cases. So he applied for a magistrate job. He received letter of support from quite a number of people. And he was appointed, as I've already stated. On this occasion, he was successful in his application. So he became essentially the first father-in-law and a son-in-law deal with term of the judiciary. So both of them, they were in judiciary. His appointment, I would argue, it was significant at that time because he was still a Chinese national at that time. I found his naturalization record, it only happened 3 years later. So he made headways in judicial service, became a senior magistrate, acting principal magistrate by 1963. And in the meantime, he desired to obtain additional training in London. So he applied for Rockefeller Foundation Research Fellowship. It's a very prestigious fellowship. as you can tell later from archive document I unearthed, few people managed to obtain this award. So he decided to take a leave of absence to go back to London to do some research and to connect with the legal community in London. I would say this 1 year stay in London cemented his friendship with some very influential people in London. So he returned to London as a Rockefeller Fellow, and he spent his year at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. He actually was the only recipient from Hong Kong that year, highlighting his excellence in the legal field. So the fellowship supported legal scholars from Asia and Africa, these newly independent former British colonies, to study international and comparative law. So the fellowship selection process considered the potential impact on the fellow's country and the region. Sir T.L.'s application certainly impressed member of selection committee, and they awarded him a very prestigious fellowship. So he proposed to do a comparative study of hearsay evidence and the right to privacy. This lay bare his budding interest in these two areas of law, particularly right to privacy. And at that time, when he was in London, he said, well, he was quite interested in introducing right to privacy in Hong Kong, but he was quite aware he would face monumental resistance from the local community. After a year, he bid farewell to London, and he went back to Hong Kong. So in a farewell letter, he wrote to his colleague at Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. He described this year's experience as most fascinating and stimulating. He conducted quite in-depth research on the right to privacy in Hong Kong. So in 1963 to 64 year, as you can see, 4 fellows. Afterward, as you can tell, he rose through the ranks to become Chief Justice. This timeline could review in 1968, he was appointed district judge, second Chinese to achieve this. He got a role model preceding him. 1971, if you were interested in examining historical newspapers, it was a fantastic read. He presided over resource doping scandal trial. Then he eventually became a judge of the Hong Kong Supreme Court, and he was involved in the trial of Police Chief Superintendent Peter Gober for corruption. And if you try to read news reports and other people's for example, other people's some people, they left behind their diaries, and you could tell he was recognized as a capable, experienced judge. Some people mention him in their diary or journal. So in August 1980, he was elevated to Justice Appeal during the inquiry into Inspector John McLenna's death. 1987, he was appointed acting Chief Justice during Sir Danny's vacation, recommended by then Governor for the Chief Justice position, was announced as Chief Justice in October, was knighted by the Queen, became the first Hong Kong local to be elected honorary bench of Gracing. By October 1988, he was installed as first local Chief Justice, the Chinese, or a local Chief Justice of Hong Kong. It was a very significant appointment which came with lots of responsibilities. If you were interested in sifting through colonial office records or records reflecting cablegrams exchanged between Hong Kong and the office in government office in London, you will see at that time the British government was maneuvering to appoint someone as a Chief Justice in preparation for Hong Kong's eventual return to China. At that time, the British government had a map out of the strategy for fostering judicial independence in Hong Kong. So that marked a very significant step in decolonization. The British government tried to ensure judicial independence from the executive. As a matter of fact, Sir T.L. kept in touch with quite a number of people in London, people he befriended when he was a law student, when he was a Rockefeller fellow, and I think he made a number of visits to London afterwards as well. So you could tell from letters he wrote to Grazing. He periodically tried to update his career accomplishment in Hong Kong. So he made history, the very first Chinese to become Chief Justice, and someone who was not born in Hong Kong, as I've already shown you. As a matter of fact, you got a sizable number of Hong Kong-born Chinese, non-Chinese, who were called to bar in England, who were very successful, either as a barrister or as a legal officer with the Colonial Legal Service. But Sir T.L., who was born in Shanghai, who spent his first 20 formative year in Shanghai, he only moved to Hong Kong when he was in his 20s, but he managed to achieve remarkable appointments. As Chief Justice, he aimed to do a few things. I would only highlight several contributions he made as Chief Justice. Because my research, as I've already said, I was more interested in finding out how he managed to become the first local Chief Justice. So the UK government picked him. I think it's because he got a very good idea how to develop the law in Hong Kong. Particularly, he was quite interested in adapting the English common law for Hong Kong. He essentially argued it's quite important for you to take into account Hong Kong's local circumstance in the development of English common law. And he prioritized the establishment of Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal before 1997. And because of his prior legal education in China, his familiarity with Chinese classics, he emphasized it's quite important to blend British common law with Chinese legal elements. Moreover, he urged the judiciary to be open to constructive criticisms. But as Chief Justice, he faced 4 Herculean tasks: to establish final court of appeal, creating a bilingual court system. He is perfectly bilingual, as you could tell. He grew up in Shanghai. He spoke Shanghainese, Cantonese, and the Mandarin as well. So he was quite interested in creating bilingual court system. He did quite a number of speeches on this topic, and he wrote article about that as well. Then a very important challenge he faced was how to attract local lawyers to ditch very lucrative career as a practicing barrister to join the bench. Moreover, he was quite interested in enhancing the judiciary's reputation. I would argue he made a very important contribution in the initial localization of the Hong Kong judiciary. But it was a tall order. It was a quite difficult task for him, because when he became chief, if you try to survey the judicial landscape in Hong Kong, few locals in High Court and Appeal Court at the time. He advocated for appointing right person based on merit, not nationality. So he seemed to be someone who is in favor of meritocracy in the appointment of judicial officers. But the challenge he got to grapple with was quite real. By 1991, only 2 Chinese judges in the High Court, no local in Court of Appeal. In 1992, Henry Lytton, who was also a Mertonian, who read law at Merton College at Oxford University, he was quite exceptional judge who was appointed to the Court of Appeal directly. Then Bacardi became the second local judge on the Court of Appeal in 1993. When I was a law student at CU, I met him in person. He stepped down from the court, I think, at that time. So his appointment was quite praised by news media in Hong Kong as well. If you try to take a look at the newspaper in Singapore, I mean, other common law jurisdiction in Asia, they greet this news with approval. And he was set to retire in June, but he received extension until February 1997. There was one matter, probably I should have mentioned, that was that time in 1995. There was a controversy he faced. It arose from his remark on the Bill of Rights at a private dinner. In a private conversation with Beijing government official, it was claimed he essentially said the Bill of Rights undermine Hong Kong's legal system. The reason I think he held some honest view, as I delve into some records, he believed the Bill of Rights ordinance, it blurred the line between judiciary and legislature. And his comments led to public uproar, and some people called for his resignation. He clearly refused. But in September 1996, he announced his candidature for the chief executive of Hong Kong's election. In order to maintain judicial independence, he resigned while running for the election. At the time of his retirement from the judiciary, when stepped down, then governor praised his 40 years of very dedicated service to Hong Kong. Then the acting Chief Justice commended his patience and fairness as well. I would say if we try to take stock of his many years of service to the Hong Kong judiciary, he did some brilliant job in positioning Hong Kong judiciary at the forefront of common law jurisdictions. So now I would try to make a few concluding remarks. I will give you like 15 minutes for you to ask any question you may have. So I will conclude in like 5 minutes. I would say he managed to make history to become the first Chinese Chief Justice. It's something I was very proud of his accomplishment. I think it was an extraordinary accomplishment, but we have to attribute his success to his education in Shanghai. The first 20 years, secondary school in Shanghai, undergraduate education in Shanghai, then a full-fledged legal education at the UCL. Moreover, I think the Green Inc.'s funding for his pupillage paved the way for him to gain practical experience. for him essentially to get a very good overview of the court system in England as well as the world of legal practice. And his one-year fellowship, as I have stated before, it helped him to connect with some very influential people in London when he was already a Hong Kong magistrate. His undergraduate education helped him to gain very strong skill in English and Chinese, knowledge of various legal system and histories. At that time, the law curriculum in China require you to study other subjects as well. Essentially, he got to study some courses related to general education. Moreover, I think we also have to highlight his family background. His family is no ordinary family. So his family managed to provide essential context and opportunities for him to overcome racial and social barriers. For his legal career in Hong Kong, I would take the view his father-in-law, the Tam family, played quite an instrumental role in helping him to breaking these racial and social barriers. And moreover, I would say timing is also quite important. He got a very nice personality. He got a vision for Hong Kong's judiciary. He managed to get along well with then Chief Justice Sir Danny, who got a very, I would say, not a very nice temper, but it appears he managed to get along well with his colleagues. And then the timing, as I've already emphasized, it was the British official policy, the British government's efforts to strengthen judicial independence before Hong Kong's transfer of sovereignty to Beijing. Beijing would resume its exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong. So the British government, now these documents, they've already been declassified. And we got a very fine professor, Michael, at Hong Kong U. He wrote a very good book. If you're interested, you could read that book to understand what happened behind the scene. So then I would say it's because he had opportunity to practice law in his father's chamber, to gain experience as magistrate, district judge, High Court judge, and eventually Hong Kong Supreme Court. He was quite grateful for opportunity he obtained in Hong Kong. He was quite cognizant of the fact that he had his first 20 years formative experience in Shanghai, not Hong Kong. So on many occasions, he expressed his gratitude for Hong Kong. Without Hong Kong, he essentially said, I would not be what I am today. He's a brilliant jurist and judicial administrator. I think we need to conduct further research in order to fully understand his impact as a jurist and administrator. My research only tried to uncover his early years as a law student in Shanghai, London, as well as his early professional career in Hong Kong. I have not delved into archival documents, some of them they are still closed, about his work as a senior judicial administrator in Hong Kong. I think it's quite important that we should try to document what he had done as a jurist, as a judge, and as a court administrator. Young on many occasions expressed the hope that if you want to become a judge, he took the view the ideal judge should possess a few attributes. He imparted wise advice to young people in Hong Kong and mainland China as well. He was one of pioneer Hong Kong judge who decided to come to mainland China in 1990s, to teach law, to give public lecture on common law, how common law could for example, work with Chinese law at prestigious university in China, in Beijing, like Peking University. So he told students, an ideal judge he envisaged should be knowledgeable, patient, courteous, balanced, and dignified. I would argue Sir T.L. Young fulfilled the vision he had of ideal judge. So I have come to the end of this seminar. I'm sorry I've tried to bore you with all these historical facts. If you've got any question, I'd be happy to take questions from you. Then I will hand over back to Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor. And no, you weren't boring at all. It was a very, very interesting seminar. Really interesting to hear about the early life of Sir T.L. as well. And I know I've already got some questions that have come in, and I think maybe Mr. Neo would like to ask a question. You were talking there about further research, and again about Sir T.L.'s contributions and research into those. And you mentioned about his wise advice to young people, and of course, you know, I think that's something we have to acknowledge as well. His dedication to legal education as well, because he supported all of the law schools, I think, in Hong Kong, but in particular, I think CUHK Law, we are so grateful to him, because from an early part of, well, very early in our history, he was sort of instrumental in trying to encourage the law school, the establishment and the development of our law school. And of course, he very kindly lent his name to our society, Sir T.L. Young Society at CUHK Law, which really serves to try and encourage our students and help them to actually join the professions. And I think your sort of focus on his early education has definitely given me, I think, some inspiration about why he was so dedicated to this, because obviously he overcame so many challenges in his dedication to become a lawyer and a judge, and took advantage of opportunities when he could as well. So I think that's probably something that's sort of maybe in his later life, his dedication to promoting legal education would be something to talk about. I don't know, did you get a chance to sort of think about any of this?
Yes. So I think in his later year, I actually tried to, during his later years as well, he actually he seemed to attach a great deal of importance to the offering of legal education in Hong Kong. That probably explains. I'm a CU law graduate. When I was a student, I know there's a society. He agreed to allow the society to be associated with him. So, and moreover, I found documentary evidence to show, as a matter of fact, he was quite instrumental in the establishment of the law department at Hong Kong U as well. So I think he realized probably in order to promote the quality of judicial service in Hong Kong, legal education is key. That probably explains why he did not only try to promote legal education in Hong Kong, he tried to promote legal education in mainland as well. He took the view it's quite important that for the mainland and the mainland legal system and for the Hong Kong common law system, they should be able to find a way to build bridges and for them to work together in some areas. So I think this particular episode, it's worth delving into in later. Particularly, he seemed to have some very important view how the common law in Hong Kong should develop after the handover.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, my memories of him at the high table dinners of the Sir T.L. Young Society was, his giving of his time to our students and his really, his enthusiasm to talk with them and to again listen to them and encourage them in their legal studies and their legal careers. I think it was, as you say, very important, perhaps in Hong Kong U's development, but definitely the CUHK law, I think, in our establishment and our development as well. I believe that Mr. Neo is now able to talk to us. So can
Well,
I...
thank you very much indeed, Stephen. And first of all, let me thank Professor Chan Lee for a very illuminating talk. You know, I thought that I knew TL quite well, but there are many things that Professor Chan Lee told us today that I didn't know about. It was quite illuminating, and thank you very much indeed. I thought that perhaps I might just add three things to the story, very fascinating story that Professor Chan Lee told us. The first is his contribution to the Chinese university that Stephen and both Professor Chan Lee's talked about. But that actually is a story behind it, and an important story. When the law faculty was started, we were the sort of upstart between the two law schools which have been well established. And it was thought very important, in fact, that we should have somebody with prestige and gravitas to help the law school from its beginnings. So that was why the vice chancellor at the time decided to form an executive committee for the law school. And that executive committee, in fact, was chaired by Sir TL. He very kindly decided to do that. It was actually quite demanding work for the first few years, including interviewing various people and so on and so forth. And Sir TL came into this task with a great deal of enthusiasm, passion, and as both of you said, you know, his great love for education. So I thought that was one thing that is worth mentioning. The other two things that I thought were worth mentioning, and Chen Li was saying that we should do a little bit more research in his other work other than his judicial work. Sir TL was one of the very few justices of the High Court which chaired many commissions of inquiry. During his career, he chaired, I believe, 6 commissions of inquiry, many of which were of great importance to Hong Kong. One of the very difficult ones, I was his counsel for this one for 2 years, 1980 to 1982, which is called the McLennan Commission. It was highly political, and he showed his great mental as a person of independence. You know, everybody was trying to get at him. It was very, very difficult. But then he stood his ground and produced a report which is completely in consonance with the terms of reference. Everybody wanted him to exceed that, but he didn't. And that was true mettle, true, I think, judicial independence. The other thing I thought which was interesting, that Chen Li was referring to Sir TL's efforts in trying to get people to join the bench. You see, he resorted to a thing which is not very well known to people. He was, I think, one of the first chief justices, if not the only one, who used headhunters. Now, I was one of his headhunters. You see, he didn't have any money to pay headhunters. But then he asked senior members of the profession to try and introduce people to him. And I was one of his headhunters, and no doubt he must have many others. But I thought that was a very creative way of recruitment. And, you know, Sir TL was a person who's not only an upstanding person and a person of great independence, he is quite creative in many ways. So that is all that I would want to add.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niu. It's great to see you here.
Very good to get those sort of personal anecdotes as well to do with Sir TL. I've got some questions that have been sent in to us for the professor as well. So if I can start with, this is one I think that links into when you were saying about the difficulties that Sir TL had in trying to really change the judiciary and the way that the courts were running when he took over as Chief Justice. So we've got a question here which says, thank you very much for a very interesting seminar. With his rich experience and his living environment, Sir TL was more likely to be maybe westernized, but he was always committed to promoting Chinese in the courtroom and even suggested that traditional British court dress was ancient, tiring, uncomfortable, and expensive. Even to this day, many Hong Kong justices and lawyers value the traditional garbs, the wigs and the gowns in the court very much. So I was wondering what made Sir TL stick to this sort of attempt perhaps to rid of that sort of, I suppose, the colonial side of the courtroom.
Thank you. I think this is a terrific question. For those of you, if you're familiar with Sir TL, you will know he was quite impressed by a legendary hero, Yue. He got a copy of our Chinese version of story of Yue. He actually translated from the classical Chinese into English. Then he got a massive volume of Chinese dictionary. I mean, if you had visited his office before, he enjoyed reading Chinese classics, Western classics as well. But he got extensive works on, he seemed to be an antique collector as well, a Chinese ceramics collector as well. As I have really hinted during my seminar, I think his first 20 formative year in Shanghai, that influenced his worldview. Particularly, I also emphasize the historical backdrop he grew up. He grew up during a time in Shanghai, although it was only semi-colonized, but you got a UK court in Shanghai, American court in Shanghai. The Chinese judiciary, they did not exercise jurisdiction over certain class of people. If you're American, if you got involved in legal dispute, you end up not before a Chinese court. You end up before the United States court for China. I think this particular episode, historical episode, it shaped his, I would argue, a worldview. And for the first 20 years in China, for his curriculum at both secondary school and university, he was exposed to Chinese history, and he was I think was a lover of Chinese literature as well. So I think it came as no surprise. If you knew bookshelves, the bookshelf vividly exemplifies the seamless fusion of both culture, Western and Chinese culture. You've got Chinese classics, Western classics, massive volumes of Chinese classics. So I think that also explains why he was quite interested. I think he was not the exceptional one. At that time in Hong Kong, as far as my research showed, you got a quite sizable number of people who was incredibly interested in decolonizing Hong Kong's judiciary. And the first thing they thought they got to tackle is the language. It got everything to do with access to justice. You got all these, for example, plaintiffs or a party to dispute, they could only speak Cantonese or Mandarin. And but the entire hearing was conducted in English language. So for his contemporaries, if we try to read some historical newspaper in Hong Kong, you would know quite a lot of people like him, they advocate for the decolonization of the judiciary. Then the first thing they got to do probably is the language. For you to do it well, probably you got to recruit local judges.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. I wonder how much that has to do with having to learn Latin as well, to go to, as someone who also had to learn Latin when I was at school. I think, yes, perhaps it's better that we don't have to learn that now. But questions come in again, and thank you for fascinating a seminar. You mentioned that your research took place in both Hong Kong and of course, in London. What resources did you seek out there? Because you've shown us a number of documents, but what sources, what libraries or other things did you use for your research?
Usually, if we try to conduct this type of research, for my research, actually, I got a very big project. I'm trying to document the pioneer generation of Chinese lawyers in Hong Kong. Chinese lawyer, I mean Chinese barrister and Chinese solicitor, from the late 19th century up to 1940s. That explains why I had to spend quite a big chunk of my time digging to archive at 4 inches of courts, Lincoln Inn, Middle Temple, Inner Temple, and grazing. I have already actually unearthed all these archive documents about every Chinese person, Chinese broadly defined, including Eurasian as well. Everyone who studied in London was going to bar, and they eventually either practice law in Hong Kong or work in other professions. So usually I begin with Ingzhou Court. Then I would go to university archives. Some of them, they have left behind some documents they submit to university in seeking admission. Then usually what I would try, some occasion, I might be able to find some documents from the Public Records Office in Kiev. The reason is some of these people in 1920s, in 1930s, the colonial office played a role in connecting them with Ingzhou courts or other bodies in UK. So these are 3 places. Usually I will begin my research. And quite a number of them, they actually had experience in mainland China as well. So I usually will begin with the local archives. For example, Shanghai Municipal Archive. Suzhou University was shut down by communist government. As a result, all records were transferred to Shanghai Municipal Archive. So you actually have to sift through rows of microfilm documents in order to find these interesting correspondence, application form, testimony, etc. Another source sometimes that would be helpful is like if they had traveled to some places like Australia and the US, because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, usually you got to submit all kinds of documents to prove you were a bona fide visitor. You have to show evidence that you were, for example, a barrister, a solicitor in Hong Kong for a number of years. And you might be able to find these documents in, if it's in the US, usually you'll be able to find them in the National Archive. Usually the archive in San Francisco, National Archive, you've got offices in various places, but usually the Chinese people arrive in San Francisco or Seattle first. So I spent quite a bit of time in Seattle as well as San Francisco.
Thank you very much. One of the documents that stands out to me, of course, was the CHEN's transcript, which showed what I think is a very sensible idea that the London universities at the time shared their electives. I think that's a nice idea for perhaps universities in Hong Kong at one point to think about perhaps doing something along those lines. I'm not sure everyone would agree with this, but I think it's quite a good idea for legal education to go along those lines. So thank you. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. I know I have got some other questions that people wanted to ask you. Perhaps I can pass them on to you afterwards, Professor. Apart from that, it just remains for me to thank everyone for coming along to the first in this year's series of seminars in the Greater China Legal History seminar series. Thank you for our distinguished attendees as well, Dr. Neo and members of CHEN's family. And of course, thank you very much to our speaker today, Professor Chen Li, for a really fascinating seminar, which provided an insight for many of us who only knew some of the outline of CHEN's achievements on the formative years of his legal career as well. So thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for everyone. And I hope to see you again at the next in our Greater China Legal History Seminar Series. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bye-bye.